Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, welcome to our special, hello. There are seats up in front. You're welcome to take them. It's time to begin. Welcome to our special September 18th City Council meeting. Please join me to salute the flag.
Councilmember Engstrom.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stearns. Councilmember Sackliffe.
Here.
Councilmember Wagner. Here. Mayor Mortar.
I'm here. Okay, greetings Mount Shasta, folks. And if I can ask you to stop your conversations, we'll begin. Thank you. Okay, as we always do, we have a public comment period at the outset of our meeting, which is for those of you who may want to make a comment that is about something that's not on our agenda tonight, so not about the final Crystal Geyser EIR. If there are any of those in the audience who would like to comment on something else, share information with us, please come on up right now, and you'll have 3 minutes to share your information. Is there anyone who would like to speak to something other than what's on the agenda? Okay, we're single focused tonight. I'd like to go now then to City Manager Bruce Pope to introduce the subject of the City of Mount Shasta's response to Crystal Geyser's final environmental impact report. Bruce?
Thank you, Mayor Mortar. As you stated, tonight's meeting is for the purpose of formulating our response to the final environmental impact report for the use permit and the associated impact report. This is scheduled for hearing for the County Planning Commission on this Wednesday, September 20th. In our review of the document within plan, the issue was raised whether or not the County Planning Commission has the proper authority to be the certifying agency.
Bruce, some folks are having trouble hearing you. Perhaps.
Sorry, okay. Unfortunately, this mic, if you can hear me, then also it gets a lot of interruptions, but we'll do our best here. So the question was raised whether or not this County Planning Commission has been properly given the authority to certify a final environmental document. We contacted Terry Barber, the county CAO, and as of 5 o'clock today, they cannot determine the proper response. But they said they would meet some more tonight and give us an answer in the morning.
Bruce, I'm sorry. Can you try another mic? This is, it's not working very well.
Does this work any better? Yes. All right, here we go. Okay.
Could you just please repeat the point you made about the Planning Commission and your inquiry about the timing of it?
Yes, and as I was saying, in the review of the final environmental impact report, the question was raised whether or not the County Planning Commission has the appropriate authority to certify a final EIR. And we contacted Terry Barber, the county CAO, asked the question. They spent the day, county council and the planning director, trying to determine the answer, and they have not come to a conclusion at this point. They said they would do their best to get back to us tomorrow morning with an answer to the question. If the Planning Commission does not have authority, then it would go to the board and have to be rescheduled and renoticed. Additionally, if they hold it at the Planning Commission, of course, you, the public, as well as the city, have the right to appeal it, whatever decision the Planning Commission may make, to the Board of Supervisors. So there are some options here. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to formulate the City Council's response to the county on the county's EIR and the use permit on the Crystal Geyser project. I would like to inform the public that comments you make here are not part of the county record on the EIR. The comments that you wish to make the EIR must be made to the county to be included in consideration. The comments that come from the city may include comments raised by members of the public, we have many, and they may be more reserved as to the council's official comments. But you are encouraged and reminded that your comments need to be made to the county prior to the hearing to be considered. So tonight, we're going to have Carla Thompson, who's from N-Plan, go through N-Plan's review of the final EIR and their comments for the benefit of the public and the council, and then the council will give staff direction on what they want to be included in an official letter to the county. Now, in trying to assist and move this forward, I drafted a letter. It's purely a draft, and it's addressed to Alan Calder, County Community Development Director, regarding the Crystal Geyser EIR. And I drafted this in a form so the City Council can have a format within which to insert their comments, and so we can move this thing forward. So I'd like to read just the beginning part of it. So it says, the City of Mount Shasta is in receipt of Siskiyou County Planning Commission staff report regarding Crystal Geyser use permit application and final environmental impact report. On September 18, 2017, Mount Shasta City Council held a special council meeting to take public comment and formulate the city's official response to the use permit application, which is UP 1603, and the potential certification of the final environmental impact report on the project. The City of Mount Shasta has concluded that the final EIR fails to adequately address the concerns of the City of Mount Shasta as set forth in our response to comments, which were submitted February 24, 2017, regarding the draft environmental impact report. The city's specific concerns regarding the final EIR are set forth below. Because of the complexities of the project and the degree of public concern, the City of Mount Shasta respectfully requests that Siskiyou County, at a minimum, take the following actions. 1, withdraw the Crystal Geyser use permit application from the Planning Commission September 20th, 2017 meeting agenda. Extend the period for public comment on the final EIR to October 31st, 2017. Agree to meet the representatives of the City of Mount Shasta with the intent of developing a clearer understanding of the identified environmental impacts, the proposed mitigation measures, and associated public concerns. 4th, to immediately commence negotiations of a tax sharing agreement regarding the fiscal impacts of the proposed development on the city of Mount Shasta. Now, what would follow after that would be in-plans comments. The city incorporates any public comments that the city deems it wants to incorporate into this letter. The letter would hopefully be finalized tomorrow and forwarded to the county. And with that, I think it would probably be best, Ms. Thompson, if you'd walk them through your analysis
Sure.
of the final impact report. Thank you.
One critical item that I noticed in the FEIR, Final Environmental Impact Report, and response to comments, they state that the county's standard first condition of approval on use permits requires that the project substantially conform to the project description as submitted to the county and the environmental document prepared for the project. I reviewed the county's draft Planning Commission resolution, and it does not reference the EIR or specifically reference the project description. In the letter that I provided, I included some recommended language, and I would strongly urge you to ensure that the county includes the revised language so that it reflects the EIR and the project description that is adopted by the Planning Commission. Under utilities, the city's comment letter requested a couple of different options. First was for the sewer pipeline. The city would like to see two 18-inch pipelines rather than a single to address cumulative impacts in the city. This is what was recommended in the master water plan and sewer plan, and also by Pace Engineering. The county's response to that comment regarding wastewater treatment option 1 was that because the city is the responsible agency and will issue the permit to connect to the city's sewer system, the city has the discretion to require its preferred options. I want to point out a couple of things. They did remove one of the options. There were originally 4 options, now there are 3. All 3 options would dispose of the domestic wastewater flows to the city's sewer system, and then industrial process and industrial rinse wastewater flows would be allowed to be discharged to the on-site leach field or to the leach field for sparkling and flavored sparkling water only. So although the city does have the option for any flows that are discharged to the city's sanitary sewer system, I am not sure that the city does have the option to say no to the on-site leach field provision. So that is one more item that should be taken into consideration. Also, I noticed today that the final environmental impact report and response to comments state that the initial wastewater treatment option will be selected prior to project approval. However, in reviewing the Planning Commission staff report and supplemental documents, I did not see that they identified the initial wastewater treatment option, and perhaps they aren't aware that that's in there, but that is something that the city said that they would do. In terms of aesthetics, the city's comments were to require that the county review the lighting plan and the sign plan in consultation with the city to ensure that the plans conform to the city's code regarding lighting and signage. A mitigation measure requiring final review of the lighting plan was not included in the EIR. However, the county code states that any sign permitted under the county code is reviewed by the county's planning director. It seems like the county's regulations for lighting and signs align with the city's requirements. Also, there is an appeal procedure for that. If somebody doesn't like the approval of the Planning Commission or the planning director, they could appeal that decision on signage and plans to the Planning Commission, and then ultimately to City Council if it gets to that.
Carla, excuse me, I
Yes.
guess I should have discussed this first. I wonder how fellow council members feel about inquiring of Carla as we go along, if you have questions. The next step in the process is for us to ask questions of staff. I'm wondering, since this is a long document, if it makes more sense for us to pause between the different sections to ask if people have questions.
Whichever you prefer.
Let's do that. So how are we so far with questions of Carla? I have one.
Okay.
I'm a bit confused about the appeal process that you just reviewed. That it says in here that the planning director's decision may be appealed to the planning commission, and the planning commission's decision may be appealed to city council.
Correct.
That-
Board of Supervisors.
Board
I've
of
been working for
Supervisors.
cities too long.
Yes,
That
to
is
the Board of
correct. Board of
Supervisors. So in
Supervisors.
essence, we are not in that process
That is
anywhere.
correct. That is correct. Thank you.
So I'll ask right now that be corrected for the record. Okay, let's go ahead and go on, Carla,
Okay.
thanks.
The next section relates to groundwater, water supply, and cumulative impacts. The city's letter stated that it didn't appear that the draft environmental impact report addressed impacts to the city's future wells or take into consideration future development in the Spring Hill area. And the response to that comment was, according to CEQA, cumulative impacts are based on reasonably foreseeable development, and because there is not a specific plan for the Spring Hill area, that wouldn't be considered a foreseeable development. Also, they discussed the city's general plan and the slow growth rates within the city. They also discuss impacts on the municipal well and state that timing for the construction of new wells is also uncertain. They reference the city's water master plan, which states that those improvements are not expected to be built within the 2030 planning horizon, and also the city's 2014 to 2018 capital improvement program identifies well number 3 as a post-2018 future unfunded project. So any estimates for growth that would trigger the need for these new facilities would be speculative. The cumulative projects listed in the DEIR included the Lassen Substation Project, the city's wastewater treatment and outfall improvement project, the DeGray zone change investing tentative parcel map, Roseburg property development, and the McLeod Springwater Company bottling plant. The FEIR did add one project to the cumulative list, that is the city's municipal wells. And in the FEIR, it states that the city's master plan notes that there has been no measurable population growth in Mount Shasta in recent years, as well as no measurable increase in water consumption since 1986. And in the absence of an adopted specific plan that establishes allowable densities for the Spring Hill area, it is reasonable to conclude that development would be speculative at this time. The next area would be groundwater and water quality, and yes.
Before you move on to the next area, in terms of the city's improvements up on Spring Hill, the city is currently looking for funding, I think, for a well and a water tank up on Spring Hill. So I anticipate that's going to happen much sooner than 2030.
Okay. Okay. I wasn't aware of that, but that can certainly be noted.
Rod, do you happen to have a memory of where it is in our plan? Okay, so let's just put that down as an action that needs to be followed up on, confirmed. Thank you.
Okay. The next area is groundwater and water quality. The draft EIR describes groundwater parameters that were measured and monitored on site over the past years when the previous operation was underway. The DEIR states the existing groundwater wells could be used to monitor these groundwater parameters in the future if necessary. The city requested that mitigation be required to require a data collection program that would measure certain parameters and impacts on the aquifer before they move on to phase 2, which would be the full build-out with the second bottling line. The response to those comments references the 10 years of monitoring data that's available that includes groundwater levels, pumping rates, and precipitation data. Additional studies that were completed following review of the EIR. Additional analysis included a supplement to the hydrogeological report and an analysis of groundwater level data technical memorandum. The additional analysis included a 10-day aquifer pump test. The first step in that test was to provide water level and flow rate data. The purpose of the test was to provide water level and flow rate data to help determine impacts, also to determine the current capacity of the subject well while pumping at the maximum operational pumping rate of the well, and to provide data to help allow the direct calculation of the aquifer parameters. And then the testing was conducted over a 10-day period. The first step was conducting a baseline period of water level monitoring in selected observation wells. And then the second part of the test was continuous pumping of the domestic well at an average rate of 247 gallons per minute over a continuous period of 72 hours or 3 days. And then following the end of the pumping portion of the test, monitoring of the water level recovery in the selected observation wells. 247 gallons per minute was selected as a conservative approach because Crystal Geyser at full build out of the project is estimated to have a demand of 16 gallons per minute, assuming that the well is pumping only 80% of the time. If the well were to be pumped at its maximum rate of 250 gallons per minute to supply their demand, then it would need to pump for only about 73 minutes each day, not for 3 days or 72 hours in a row of continuous pumping. The test concluded that the domestic well extracts groundwater primarily from the lower aquifer system. There is limited connectivity between the upper and lower aquifer systems in the vicinity of the domestic well. And as a result of the pump testing, a maximum water level drawdown of approximately 0.6 feet was recorded in the domestic well, and potential drawdowns at adjacent wells will decrease as the distance from the pumped well increases. During operation of the project, as I mentioned, the domestic well will be likely cycling on and off during the day rather than constantly pumping, so the drawdown is not anticipated to be 0.6 feet. Given the distance of the adjacent wells from the domestic wells, drawdown at adjacent wells is anticipated to be no more than 0.6 feet. And historical monitoring data from previous operations showed that the drawdown tied to previous uses was 1.5 feet of groundwater level fluctuation. So with Crystal Geyser at their proposed pumping rates, The drawdown is anticipated to be much less than in the past. Testing also confirmed that recharge to adjacent wells would not be affected because the wells are generally located up gradient of the production wells at the project site. In my comment letter, I referenced a technical memorandum that was prepared by Geosyntec Consultants and CH2M in June of 2017. The authors of this report include California professional geologists, a certified hydrogeologist, and certified engineering geologists with a combined total years of experience of 60 years. Their relevant experience includes evaluation of impacts associated with groundwater supply projects, evaluation of groundwater basins and bedrock aquifers, aquifer testing, well field design, long-term groundwater yield analyses, and watershed protection management. Relevant information that was cited in the EIR was reviewed by Geosyntec and CH2M, and their technical memorandum references the monitoring data that was collected over the 10-year period, and that indicates that that information provides sufficient data on which to make a determination regarding potential pumping impacts. The report affirms that no matter how complex the aquifer conditions, because pumping has a minimal effect on the pumped well at 0.6 feet, the proposed pumping will have a minimal, if any, effect on water levels in surrounding wells. In addition, there was no long-term trend of water level decline noted in any of the prior monitoring data. As documented in the FEIR, the changes in water level were tied to precipitation rather than activities at the plant. In addition, pursuant to the California or the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, Crystal Geyser is required to conduct monitoring in accordance with the WDRs. Quarterly monitoring of groundwater in 3 monitoring wells is required. In addition, the production well, domestic well, and 2 other wells are also currently equipped with data loggers. Information obtained on groundwater level data is also provided to the Regional Water Quality Control Board on a quarterly basis. In addition, weekly, monthly, and quarterly sampling of effluent and quarterly monitoring of groundwater is required, and it is possible, if approved by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, that some of the constituents can go to an annual monitoring, but that would have to be approved by the monitoring board. One comment that I made in my letter that I would like to reword, I believe I stated that there is no substantial evidence that the project would have impacts on groundwater. I did glance at the comments that were submitted. A lot of the comments were in relation to groundwater and the impacts this project would have on adjacent wells. The comments were a total of 841 pages, and the comments were not quite that lengthy, but the response to comments were 391 pages, and I did not have time to review all of the comments to determine whether or not some substantial evidence of impacts to adjacent wells was presented. Although...
Question.
Yes.
So could you expand upon your comment as to what you would like to do in terms of modifying this?
Correct. Because substantial evidence has been presented supporting that the proposed project would not adversely impact adjacent wells in the area, and monitoring of groundwater levels and constituents will be conducted in compliance with Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board requirements, it appears that the majority of the city's comments have been adequately addressed.
So a question for clarification, Carla. You said you didn't have time to review all the comments.
Correct.
And I'm assuming you mean those that just came in to us this week?
No, I am discussing the final environmental impact
I see.
report and
Okay.
the 891
Okay.
pages of comments that were submitted.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
through the chair, Carla, would it be your intent then to review those comments prior to finalizing the report for the city?
What I'm hoping is that the county will pull this off the Planning Commission agenda and give us until the end of October to spend some additional time reviewing that information.
Okay. And you mentioned that a majority of the concerns were adequately addressed. And as to the other concerns, how should we respond to the county?
The additional comments state that even though the final environmental impact report does not require a data collection program that includes parameters that must be met before they go to the next higher pumping capacity for their full bottling line, because the project will pump less water under the full production phase than the prior bottling facility, and associated drawdown in adjacent wells will be less than with the prior bottling facilities. Impacts are anticipated to be less than significant.
I'm not sure that answered my question.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Just for clarification, 891 pages of comment and 391 pages of responses to comments, is that what you said?
Yes, a lot of the comments were, for example, the same comments, concerns with groundwater, concerns with noise and vibration and traffic. So they prepared master responses that addressed a lot of the comments in the 891 pages rather than responding and repeating the same comment over and over. There were several master responses.
So I want to acknowledge the very short turnaround time you had to complete this report and express our gratitude for the thoroughness with which you did your review. And to return to the question that is still in my mind, if you were us, would you ask that we ask you to complete your review of all the comments that have come in order to substantiate your statement that there is no substantive evidence to the contrary?
It would be very helpful to have that time to review the additional comments from others.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Carla.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding groundwater? Okay, we'll move on to noise and vibration. The city's comment letter requested a mitigation measure to state that no truck traffic and no operation of vehicles equipped with backup warning alarms shall occur between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And the city also requested additional analysis of vibration impacts. The project was amended to restrict truck traffic and loading dock operations to between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. This will eliminate the use of backup warning devices during nighttime hours. So the county did respond to the city's concern and amend the hours of operation. In addition, additional noise and vibration testing was conducted by Ballard Acoustical. And what they did was they conducted this testing with the project-related major noise generating equipment in operation. They reviewed perceptible vibration impacts off-site and noted that no perceptible off-site vibration was detected. They also did additional vibration testing of the well. The well is more than 1,000 feet from the nearest residences to the east and more than 1,200 feet from the nearest residences to the south. The study concluded that pump vibration levels at this distance would be well below the threshold of perception. In addition, equipment used during prior plant operations is being replaced with new equipment that has little to no potential for vibration, and compressors and other vibration-generating equipment, which were the subject to most of the concerns regarding vibration, would be installed on resilient mounts to isolate the equipment from the building slab, which would prevent vibration from occurring off-site. This would render vibration generated by on-site equipment imperceptible at off-site noise-sensitive receptors, so it appears that the city's concerns have been adequately addressed.
Carla, are there objective criteria or standards for vibration and, well, let me just ask about vibration. And if so, can they be put into the project so that it requires, as a mitigation measure, requires that the whatever vibration falls below a certain criteria?
And
Maybe you can repeat the question.
the question was regarding, is there criteria regarding vibration such as there is for noise? Typically, a general plan includes allowable levels for different uses. Most general plans that I've seen do not include the criteria for vibration, but there is, I believe it's a Caltrans manual on vibration that is referenced in the final environmental impact report. And it does describe levels and whether or not they would be perceptible or whether they would be annoying to individuals. The documentation in the final environmental impact report concludes that the vibration levels of the proposed project would be below any threshold of being perceptible off-site.
So could it be built into the project plan that the vibration levels must be below a certain level?
That is a possibility. I'm not sure if it's specifically worded in their project description, but we can check on that.
Appreciate that. And while the report indicates that other vibration-generating equipment will be installed in a manner to prevent vibration from occurring off-site, and the older equipment has been replaced with new equipment with little to no potential vibration. It would be nice to have a standard for the operation.
Okay, we'll check into that one. Are there any other questions regarding noise and vibration?
Was that a vibration measured over the air waves or ground, or both?
I would have to double check. Typically, vibration is measured by ground. All right, moving on to transportation and circulation. The city addressed their concerns regarding truck traffic in the Central Business District and referenced the 1998 mitigation agreement that was discussed in the draft EIR. There is a statement that says, Dannon will use our best reasonable efforts to contractually obligate all carriers to limit access to the plant to the roads north of and including the proposed access road off North Mount Shasta Boulevard to avoid truck traffic through the Central Business District. The response to that comment states that this issue has been clarified in the final EIR to state that truck carriers would be contractually obligated to use the same route as former operations and thereby avoiding Ski Village Drive. And the determination is that because truck carriers would be contractually obligated to access the site versus their driveway off of the boulevard, they would avoid entering downtown and traveling on Ski Village Drive. Therefore, it appears the city's comments have been adequately addressed, and there are other sections where traffic is addressed. So perhaps I should get through this whole section, and hopefully that will answer all of the questions. The city also requested an analysis of the structural integrity of North Mount Shasta Boulevard and Spring Hill Drive based on truck traffic in the area. If project traffic will contribute to a significant deterioration of city streets, a mitigation measure should be included to require a road maintenance agreement between Crystal Geyser and the city. The response to that comment was in the final EIR, the traffic impact analysis was amended to include an analysis of the pavement structural section of North Mount Shasta Boulevard. The FEIR concludes that the effect of traffic on pavement is measured through the use of the traffic index. The calculations show that the traffic index for the proposed project would be 11, and the FEIR concludes that the project would not result in any changes to the current or future traffic index on North Mount Shasta Boulevard. In addition, the draft EIR assumed that outbound truck traffic would use Spring Hill Drive to reach the Abrams Lane Lake Road interchange. Based on additional analysis, it was subsequently determined that it was inaccurate to assign the project truck trips to Spring Hill Drive. Therefore, it was determined that it is highly unlikely the truck traffic related to the project would utilize Spring Hill Drive, and the analysis of pavement sections was not completed. Information regarding the traffic index calculations, in my letter, I stated that that should be reviewed by the city's public works director or a traffic engineer. Although the EIR states that the traffic index is 11, I don't know if that's good or bad. There didn't seem to be an explanation as to, is 1 through 10 put you in this category. So I was not very clear on the determination regarding the traffic index. Also, if the city concurs with the determination regarding Spring Hill Drive, it appears that the city's comments have been adequately addressed.
Yes.
Are we then rerouting these trucks? Initially, they were going to be on Spring Hill Drive, and now they're going to be taking the I-5 exit? Is that what
According to the EIR, and I apologize, I am not that familiar with the city's circulation system, but according to the EIR, yes.
So they're not going to be using the Spring Hill Drive, they'll just be coming straight off the I-5, the North City exit, go directly to the plant, and then back the same route?
Yes.
After reading this, Carla, I would have to agree that it's indeed highly unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
However, would it make sense to ask that it be prohibited? What would it take to simply say truck traffic on Spring Hill Road is prohibited? And after your report, I'd like to hear from Rod
Mm-hmm.
about his perspective on this. But is it not? What kept you from recommending that additional step?
The EIR, they seem to be a little reluctant to include a mitigation measure specifically prohibiting traffic. Rather, they stated that truck carriers would be contractually obligated. I know that some cities have a vehicle code that allows the city engineer to post certain streets within a city as trucks being prohibited. So I'm not sure if that's an option for the city of Mount Shasta, but that is a possibility, to post the streets as no trucks allowed.
Tim?
Carla, I want to follow up on that same issue. Crystal Geyser has indicated that trucks are contractually barred from using Spring Hill.
Mhm.
I'd like to see Crystal Geyser have that same contractual provision for Spring Hill.
So these are individual council member recommendations.
Well, and
Carla,
I
we
would-
need
I
to
would-
be sure that we're tracking this. By the end of the evening, we'll hopefully do our best to summarize the conclusions we'd like to have reflected in a letter.
To the chair.
Yes.
The conclusion of this last paragraph on roadways is saying that there'll be no substantial degradation of our roads with the 100 round trip of trucks that go to the plant daily. Is that what you're saying?
That is the conclusion of the traffic impact analysis, yes.
And so this is related to the TI, the traffic index, the
Correct.
analysis they did around that. And
Yes.
you are suggesting that we have that confirmed by our Public Works Director.
Correct.
And based
or
on
traffic
that,
engineer.
or traffic engineering, yeah,
Yes.
based on that, then we would conclude whether or not we feel it's been adequately mitigated.
Yes. The city's comments, oh, I'm sorry, was there another question?
Through the chair.
Yes.
So I looked up what this traffic index value means. An 11 is considered medium weight. So the traffic that is being predicted on those roads is considered medium versus light, which is the 8 to 9 range. 10, 11 is medium. Heavy is 12 to 14. What those actual numbers correlate to, I'm not sure, but that's the chart that we have here. So the 11 relates to a medium weight and effect on ramps and connectors.
Okay, Carla.
Okay. The city also provided comments on the Spring Hill Drive, Mount Shasta Boulevard, I-5 ramps intersection, and discussed concerns with site distance. The DEIR provided some suggestions on improvements that could be made, such as relocating a sign or trimming back hedges. The response was that the final environmental impact report has been revised to indicate that Crystal Geyser will work with the city to install an additional sign at the Ski Village Drive intersection to direct truck traffic to continue straight through the intersection to further reduce incidents of trucks mistakenly turning left onto Ski Village Drive. In addition, truck carriers would be contractually obligated to use the same route as with former operations, again, avoiding Ski Village Drive. The final EIR also states that the potential improvements, trimming vegetation, that could improve the site distance at the intersection of Mount Shasta Boulevard were merely recommended improvements that would address existing conditions and not mitigation measures to address effects of the project. And the determination is because Crystal Geyser will work with the city to install additional signage and that will be in accordance with city regulations and be approved by the city. And contractual obligations would prevent truck traffic on Ski Village Drive. The response partially addresses the city's comments regarding safety issues. Although the mitigation measure is not included to require the site distance improvements, because the vegetation and sign are not on property owned or controlled by Crystal Geyser, and Crystal Geyser does not have the authority to complete the improvements, the mitigation measure would be considered infeasible. So I think in that case, the best thing to do would be to work with Caltrans and address some of those issues. The city's comments also addressed the project entrance intersection with Mount Shasta Boulevard and stated that the potential for accidents would be intensified here, and reevaluation of the need for left turn lanes and acceleration lanes is needed. The DEIR did include an analysis of whether or not warrants were met for additional turn lanes or acceleration lanes, and based on the guidance from Caltrans and a policy on geometrical design of highways and streets, the FEIR concludes that the warrants were not met either for existing conditions or cumulative plus project conditions. The project would not significantly impact or change the design of any existing bicycle facilities or create any new safety problems for pedestrians or bicycles, because the additional trips would not substantially alter the traffic patterns of study area roadways. In my determination, I referenced a comment letter that was submitted by Caltrans. The letter indicates that Caltrans has reviewed the draft environmental impact report and traffic impact assessment and agrees that the assessment is adequate and that additional truck trips associated with the project are not significant. Caltrans does, however, note some previous discussions that the city had with Caltrans a number of years ago regarding development in the Spring Hill area. Caltrans recommends that the city discuss with the county whether the project should agree to enter into an agreement with the city to contribute toward future improvements to the affected intersection. And of course, the city does have this option, and that is something that I would recommend, that the city and county work together on such an agreement. However, there is no guarantee that such an agreement will ever be put into place. And the letter also addresses requested mitigation measures. Most of those are what we've already discussed. The city also requested a mitigation measure to require a road maintenance agreement between Crystal Geyser and the city, outlining a repair schedule and compensation methods for the repair of roadways. The final environmental impact report response to that comment was that city road maintenance is funded primarily by the transportation tax fund, which accrues from the excise tax on gasoline and bonds approved by state voters. Trucks and other vehicles driving to and from the project site will contribute to these funds when purchasing gasoline within the city and the county. However, there is no guarantee that the project will purchase gasoline in the city, and unless the county and city have a tax sharing agreement, the city's comment is not adequately addressed. Although the city could contact the county to discuss such an agreement, again, there is no guarantee that an acceptable agreement will be reached. Are there any questions regarding traffic and traffic impacts?
If the trucks were required to gas up, within the city limits, that they would obviously use the, that gas station down there by the facility, right? Is that within city limits? Mhm. That's the,
So for your information, the gas station is in city limits, but it is off the approved route. That would mean they'd have to go south on North Mount Shasta Boulevard outside of what's allowable.
So help me with my memory, Carla. A number of these suggested improvements or mitigations came from, I believe, the traffic engineers that N-Plan hired or has within your employ. I'm just going to take an example of the two-way lane, the additional lanes to turn left. I believe it was a recommendation that we consider that and ask that it be a mitigation. And now, given the information that you've reviewed that was submitted by the contractor, county contractor, it appears that we're saying that it doesn't warrant that, given whatever was cited. So is it, we're not in a position up here as city council members to decide between the science of one consultant and another, but is it common that different traffic engineers even would have different standards or different recommendations given the situation we have?
No, most traffic engineers rely on the same data and in determining whether or not warrants are met for turn lanes, acceleration lanes, signals, and other traffic calming devices. So there is a set standard for analyzing whether or not those improvements are required.
Okay, so that suggestion that we received was ill-advised, or that we created. I don't remember if we created it or if it came from elsewhere.
The suggestion that the city made was for additional analysis to be made regarding turn lanes and acceleration
I see.
lanes.
Okay, thank you.
So Carla, what additional determinations or research would be made to determine whether a turn lane would be appropriate? And should we be looking at just the next several months, or the next year, or within the next 5 years or 10 years?
What the traffic impact analysis does is look at existing conditions, existing plus project conditions, and they also look at the cumulative condition with the project. And what that means is at full build-out of the city, with build-out of the city's general plan, would these improvements be required?
Well, the reason I raise that, because I do think that the turn lane may be appropriate. I've had some folks talk to me about a possible future project up on Spring Hill that would have substantial traffic.
What would happen is when development is proposed in the Spring Hill area, they would also be required to complete their own traffic impact analysis. Right now, we don't know the density that will be developed in the Spring Hill area. So once that development is proposed, that development would be required to look at required traffic improvements. And at that time, when that development is approved, they may be required to install the turn lanes and acceleration lanes. But as Caltrans recommended, the city should talk to the county to talk about whether or not Crystal Geyser should be required to pay a proportionate fair share for those future improvements.
So what does that mean?
That means Crystal Geyser does not have enough of an impact to have to install those turn lanes. But sometime in the future, they will have a portion of the cumulative impact for that. So a lot of times with larger projects, they are required to pay their proportionate fair share. So is their impact 5% of the total improvement or 10%? And it is something that is calculated by traffic engineers in terms of what the proportionate fair share of a project should pay.
So mitigation measures should indicate that should a turn lane be required, that Crystal Geyser will be required to pay a proportionate share.
The final environmental impact report states that they are not including that as a mitigation measure, but the recommendation is for the city and county to work together on such an agreement.
But the city and county may not be able to come to an agreement.
That is correct.
So that seems like an inadequate resolution to me, anyway. But hopefully the
Right,
council will discuss that further.
Yeah, the issue is we don't know at this point whether turn lanes will ever be required. For example, if the Spring Hill area never develops, there would be no need for those turn lanes. So it's difficult to assign a proportionate fair share when you don't know what the future development density will be.
I understand that, but it seems to me that there ought to be include in the mitigation measure that should the requirement arise,
Mhm.
this shall happen, rather
Mhm.
than we'll discuss it at that
Mhm.
point.
And I may have missed it, Carla, but so with 6 trucks per hour, which is what is being estimated.
Right, the average in the non-peak hours.
Right. The conclusion is that that is not an adequate number to have us install a turn lane.
That is the conclusion of the traffic impact analysis, yes.
And since we hope that there will be some additional time
Mhm.
beyond Wednesday,
Yes,
perhaps you could follow up with that issue.
absolutely, yes.
Okay, how we doing? Everybody here? Can hear what's going on? Okay, okay. So this is a complex issue, and we found it necessary to go through it point by point so that we can ask our questions for clarification and have you listen as well.
And we're
Carla?
almost done. As you know, the draft environmental impact report identified significant and unavoidable impacts. Under CEQA, the county is required to prepare a statement of overriding considerations. When a project with significant and unavoidable impacts is approved, the lead agency, the county in this case, must state in writing the specific reasons to support its action based on the final EIR and other information in the record. The statement of overriding considerations shall be supported by substantial evidence in the record. And the city was assuming at that time correctly that the statement of overriding considerations would focus on the benefits of the project in terms of economic benefits. For that reason, the city requested that a fiscal impact analysis be provided as substantial evidence in support of those benefits. The final EIR stated that a fiscal impact analysis is noted, but is beyond the scope of the environmental analysis required to be addressed in the final EIR, which is correct. I reviewed the staff report for the county and the statement of overriding considerations. And the statement states that the proposed project increases the economic vitality of the region by generating approximately 60 new jobs that are anticipated to be filled locally. The project would be fiscally positive and would increase tax revenues to the county through increased and expanded commercial activities and job generation, enhancing the county's economic base. Crystal Geyser would contribute its fair share toward the cost of infrastructure improvements outside of the project site. However, it does not appear that any employment or revenue projections supporting those statements are provided for public review.
So what does CEQA law state in terms of the background material to justify such a statement?
CEQA states that the statement of overriding considerations needs to be supported by substantial evidence in the record.
Of which you're saying there was none, or?
There was no fiscal impact analysis or any specific revenue projections or a breakdown of jobs that would be created. And the city's comment letter was specific in terms of what they requested, and that would be information on costs as well as revenue, such as maintenance of wastewater infrastructure, costs associated with fire protection and emergency medical services, costs associated with street maintenance, and costs associated with other public services provided by the city and the county. And the reason we requested a fiscal impact analysis is even though the project may generate jobs and taxes, there is no discussion on costs to the city or county in terms of public services provided. So there may very well not be a net benefit in terms of economic benefits.
Okay, folks, thank you. So the fiscal impact analysis is not something that can be required because it's outside of CEQA, or at least that term. But does it, that's what I understood you to say.
It's not something that you would find in the final environmental impact report. It is something that you would see as substantial evidence in support of the statement of overriding considerations.
And you have seen these in other documents?
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor?
Okay, well, this is an area of grave concern to me. We'll address it later, but I'd certainly like to require that this be done to satisfy the needs of the city and its ability to assess whether or not this is a viable project. Yes, Tim?
So I would suggest, Carla, that in the revised end plan report, to expand this sentence into a paragraph, including what you just said,
Certainly.
perhaps repeating the city's prior requests and reasons for that.
Okay. Anything else from council members? Thank you, Tim. Anything else? And I believe we're at the conclusion.
And there's
Carla?
one more. The city also recommended that the 1998 mitigation agreement between the county and the previous operator of this facility be rescinded and replaced. Some of the mitigation measures in the 1998 agreement are outdated and not effective in reducing impacts. Also, mitigation measures identified in the proposed project conflict with some of the measures in the 1998 agreement. All applicable mitigation measures, including applicable measures from the 1998 mitigation agreement, should be included in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And that comment was provided to avoid confusion. The response to comment, again, was that the county's first standard condition of approval on use permits requires that the project conform to the project description that's approved by the lead agency, and also to the environmental document prepared for the project as recommended for adoption. The final EIR does acknowledge that mitigation proposed in the EIR is more detailed and more stringent than related requirements from the 1998 mitigation agreement. And it also states that, however, both measures will be applied as applicable, which seems a very confusing way, but that it's the county's prerogative to do it that way if they would like. Although the response states that both measures will be applied, there is no indication on how conflicts will be resolved. And again, I think it's very critical that that first standard condition that's included in the county's planning commission resolution be amended as I have described in the in-plan letter.
On page 22.
I'm sure it is. Yes, on page 22. And that concludes my comments.
Really quick, in reference to your Spring Hill,
I was just going to be, prior to going to staff, are there any other questions from council members? And Bruce, are you okay with having either Rod or Juliana or any, your staff make additional comments?
Certainly.
Okay. Juliana, what did you say? Just now? You said
The question
something.
came up about Spring Hill, the Spring Hill Water Supply and Storage Project. It is one of our 3 current drinking water state revolving fund planning grants. It is anticipated that that Spring Hill Water Supply and Storage Project planning grant be completed in the next couple of years. And then construction funding would be, you know, if it was available, we would go after construction funding in the next 3 to 5 years for construction. So it is in the works, as Tim, Mayor, Councilmember Pro Tem, Mayor Pro Tem brought up.
So he said that that Spring Hill well, the funding for that is in the works within the next 3 to 5 years. Hope for construction money to be received. Is that what you said, Ron?
Through the chair, Rod, that well is for current users of water, not for north of Spring Hill development.
Correct.
Okay, so
Mainly
that's
It's the second part of fixing all of the Big Lakes area problems.
it's to supplement our current
Yeah.
water system.
Exactly. Development of Spring Hill would require additional wells and tanks.
Right. North of Spring Hill, north of the actual hill.
So we have on our plan a water tank up at Spring Hill as well as a well. One of the reasons that we cannot develop Spring Hill is that there's no water pressure up there.
One of the reasons why we can't develop the Spring Hill area is because there is no water lines, water service to the area. Correct.
The project that's going to happen is going to service current customers. To develop the new area currently undeveloped north of Spring Hill will require an additional water system entirely, which
Water
we don't really have any plans for at all right now.
requires a
Correct.
water line.
as Carla stated, it was in our general plan to have a specific plan created for north of Spring Hill, but that has not occurred at this time, so all development is speculative.
Rod, are you prepared at this moment to comment on the adequacy of the traffic index?
No, I'm not.
You are not. Okay, so that would need to be a follow-up action. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carla and staff, for so patiently answering our questions. Bruce, do you have something else?
No, if the council has no further questions for Carla or staff, we should open for public comment.
Yes. I was just preparing to do that. There are a number of folks looking at me out there. Okay. Okay, I have a list in front of me, and I will call the names on the list first in the order that I see them. A couple of things that I'd like to request first is that remember that if you make a comment tonight, you must repeat it to the Planning Commission, or whoever the county designates will be their official hearing body. If it's not the Planning Commission on Wednesday, you've got to also repeat your comment to them to have it entered into the formal record. Number two, I'd like to request, and you've been very gracious with this before, if instead of repeating a comment that you've already heard made, if you hear a comment made that is close to what you had intended to say, it would be very gracious of you to just pass and assume that we've already heard it. We are listening carefully, so that would be wonderful to help keep our time streamlined. And lastly, I'll just remind those of you who come frequently and those of you who may not have been here that we do have a handy-dandy light box over there to help you. So as you're making your comment, as long as you have 3 minutes, and as long as it's green, you still have 2.5 minutes left. Once it turns yellow, you have 30 seconds to wrap up your comments, and we'll ask you to stop and go to the next person. So hopefully you can measure your progress as you're going along. I would appreciate that. Okay. The first person signed up is Kathy Casey. Come on up, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Casey. I'm with the Gateway Neighborhood Association, and I've talked to you about traffic concerns regarding Crystal Geyser, and Bruce Hillman addressed you about economic concerns. Water has worked with experts in both these areas to critically look at the EIR and the CG economic report that was released. With the release of the FEIR and the County Planning Staff Report, Water, many Siskiyou residents, and the experts we have utilized find the EIR to be woefully inadequate and are gravely concerned that it will be accepted. Most of our valid concerns in the FEIR are addressed with, these are acceptable conditions, it's anticipated a certain mitigation will happen, something is not expected to happen, and to the extent feasible. Would you sign a personal contract that had that wording? The planning department states that the overriding social and economic benefits outweigh adverse and significant environmental effects. Really? That's not what our economic report by Noah Enlow, who has a PhD in economics, found. Maybe 30, not 60 jobs are promised initially at low beverage manufacturing wages. Property tax will benefit the county government, and how much will that be? They write about sales taxes. What will Crystal Geyser be buying in the county? The supplies to run the business are being trucked in. The FEIR states that even the propane will be trucked in from Benicia. Will they contract with a county trucking firm? What economic and social benefits has Weed experienced from Crystal Geyser Roxanne? And the plant is in the city limits. Our traffic analyst, Tom Brohard, wrote, numerous errors continue throughout the FEIR and in the traffic report for the Crystal Geyser bottling plant. Each of these must be corrected to provide the basis for a proper analysis of the project impacts and the development of enforceable mitigation measures. From my review of these documents, the project will create significant traffic impacts that have not been properly disclosed, analyzed, or mitigated through alternatives and/or traffic improvements. The errors identified in this letter require that each of these issues be reanalyzed and reevaluated through additional study in a revised and recirculated DEIR and traffic report. And so I think that you've all realized, as it stands now, the city of Mount Shasta will be responsible for any road or intersection improvements. And just this week, the Weed City manager said that the city has spent $100,000 a year to maintain the roads at the South Weed exit where Crystal Geyser Roxanne is. And they have asphalt surface, not chip seal. Snow conditions were dismissed in the report because there's no ski resort in the city of Mount Shasta. Okay,
Kathy, you're getting close.
Yes. Okay, so, and the signs haven't worked in the past, I think you need a left turn lane. You should contact Tom Brohard.
Thank you. Okay, Beverly Harlan, you're next, and after Beverly Harlan, if Barbara Coulter could be prepared, please. Please share your name, please.
Beverly Harlan. I live in Mount Shasta. You want my address?
No.
Okay. I moved to Mount Shasta 7 years ago from the San Francisco Bay Area when I retired from teaching music. I have 2 degrees in music ed and 2 California Life teaching credentials. Although the San Francisco Bay Area is an exciting place to live, I was ready to have a quieter, calmer lifestyle. There's no other place on earth where I would like to live except Mount Shasta. Everybody was very encouraged when the city replied to the draft EIR. However, now the final EIR does not fully address the city's concerns. NPLAN did not attend the hearings in March 2014 and the hearing in July 2016 when hundreds of citizens showed up to express serious concerns about the entire concept of the project. My question is, why does Crystal Geyser want our water? This community is an international tourist attraction, as you all know. Our main economy is based on tourists. Are they concerned about increasing the declining tourist economy of Mount Shasta? No. Are they concerned about providing jobs to our local residents? No. Are they concerned that the wells of local residents might dry up and or contain particles of dirt as a result of their taking huge amounts of our water? No. Are they concerned that our sewage system would become overloaded as a result of their producing 4 times more sewage than the system can presently handle? No. Are they concerned that local residents might be required to foot the bill of the greatly increased use of our sewer system? No. Crystal Geyser should pay for any upgrading costs of our sewage system that might be required. Are they concerned about the unsightly telephone and power line poles that would be needed? No. Have they offered to pay for running the power lines underground as would normally be done in such a situation in order to preserve our precious viewshed? No. Are they concerned about the huge increase in truck traffic that would be pouring through our small town? No. Are they concerned about any of these things? It's obvious to me and to many other alert Mount Shasta citizens that Crystal Geyser wants our water because their number 1 concern is about increasing the profits of Crystal Geyser and the profits of Otsuka Pharmaceuticals, which is Crystal Geyser's parent company, the international corporation. Those who are awake to the signs of the changing times know that life on Earth cannot continue to exist if this kind of self-serving, short-sighted attitude is allowed to continue to prevail over concern for the natural resources of Earth and the health and safety of its citizens. Our planet literally can no longer tolerate such selfish approaches to any aspect of life on Earth. So I ask that the city assert its authority and demand that the county respond fully to their questions and recirculate the EIR with fully described mitigations so the public can see that the county is paying heed to the city's comments. We, the citizens, will be the ones to experience the many adverse consequences of this project: the noise, the traffic, the vibration, the light pollution, and the probable increases in our sewer and power rates if Crystal Geyser is not required to pay their fair share.
That's it, Beverly. Hey, you're welcome to give us your.
I can't hear you. What?
You're welcome to give us your letter, but your time is up.
Oh, I don't. I just still have a green light. Oh, I'm not. I was looking at this green light.
Oh, yeah. You look so puzzled. No.
I actually have.
Okay.
I have 2 more sentences.
No, please. Thank you very much for your comments, Beverly. Barbara Coulter.
My name is Barbara Coulter. I've lived in Mount Shasta for 16 years, and I'm listening to this EIR, which you heard all the statements about it. There's something more higher than just the EIR. Let's take a look at what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an international corporation that their lifeblood is money. Their soul is money. What do they want? Your water. That is more precious than gold right now. Look what's happening across the country with the disasters. Guess whose water's being shipped down to Florida and other states down there? By the tons of water. And it's going to be our water that's going to be shipped all around the country during a time when everybody recognizes that water is the new gold and water is going to be the basis of the coming war. Here, I ask this. Okay, we're looking at the EIR and mitigations and a lot of technical details. What are you going to do when the contracts are signed, Crystal Geyser is doing their thing, and then all of a sudden they're not doing what the contract says? You're up against a corporation with lawyers. They can just overwhelm you with little details and everything. They can do whatever they want to do. We will be helpless. They're looking at us as country bumpkins that they can manipulate us. They can kind of get it in bed with you for a little while. And then come morning, they're out the door and they go to their job and they take their money and your water. And that is what Crystal Geyser is all about here. I suggest you take a look at what they did in the Owens Valley. Everybody knows that the Owens Valley is a desert now, and once it was a paradise. But now, Crystal Geyser, even in the depths of the drought, and even in the depths of the dryness and the destruction of the valley, Crystal Geyser is down there. And they're still pumping as long as there's water there. I haven't checked in the last 6 months, but last year they certainly were still there. And they were kicked out of Orland, and there's been lots of other places. Their history speaks for itself. What their history is what is coming here. And it's going to hit us, and it's going to hit us where it hurts. It's going to take our money, it's going to take our resources, and then take a look at Weed. Drive through the town. It's a ghost town. It's a ghost town. And I'm sorry to describe it that way. I know they're trying desperately to try to turn it into something, but Crystal Geyser has done nothing for it. Their jobs are not there. And excuse me, sorry. Okay. God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Francis, you're next.
Let's make this plain. Crystal Geyser Otsuka deserves no active or passive support from this city whatsoever. Nothing. No pipeline, no power line, no city aquifer leach field access, no air dumping, and no water. Don't give them a damn thing, folks. But really, I sincerely really appreciate your efforts to protect us. And that really warmed my heart when Bruce said what he said right at the start of the meeting. Way to go, guys. A little bit more, please. Don't give those darn CGO people anything. The CGO intends to make us pay for the pipeline power line pollution they will proceed to dump on us. We objected. I note the promises that CGO made at public hearings and meetings. It did minimal follow-up. They've dismissed all concerns, ignored data. My data that I submitted was in black and white lab reports, and it was never looked at or mentioned at all. They gerrymandered in a bunch of collusive promises and setups, such as pollution disposal. By the way, you forgot to turn on your machine. Maybe you ought to do that. Gad, I should have kept going.
Okay.
See how honest I am?
Okay, you get 5 seconds here, Francis. I'd like to ask you to just not to be quite so raucous, because if someone were to come up here and present a different opinion, it might be more difficult for them to be honest, given the applause and laughing and that sort of thing of those of you in the audience. So I'm going to ask you to please be respectful and please be respectful. Now, I'm not going to argue with you, folks. I don't want to argue with you. So this is not a matter of speech. I understand. We already know what you're supportive of. So the clapping and that sort of thing, if you just picture yourself being someone who wanted to come up and present an alternative opinion, that would be made more difficult more than likely, by the fact that those of you are, that there's so many of you are applauding about the one perspective. That's the person I'm concerned about, and that's the person I'm going to insist that please decline from clapping. Thank you. Francis, you have another 30 seconds.
No, I don't. She had the machine off. Would you turn on the machine now, miss?
You're at a minute 22. I keep
Okay. Something that was not mentioned this evening is their air filters that they propose. I might say that the kind of air filter that they're proposing exists only in NASA labs. They do not exist, they do not remove nanoparticles, and the stuff that they're proposing put in are cheapo filters that won't catch hardly anything. They'll catch a lot of crap, but they won't catch very much of it at all. They're lying to us again. The irrigation scheme was only a shill about putting sprinklers out there. We know that the cheapest is dumping into the leach field aquifer or piping the problem downriver to Dunsmuir. They ignored my data. The state has told me to call them if the leach field pipe flows, and by God I will. I'll be there with this for a pre-sample, and I'll have the state right there after me, and I'm gonna be right there at that pipe where it flows across Mount Shasta Boulevard, and we're taking samples and sending them in, if that happens. I call for much more hydrologic studies before the FER is approved. The risk is too great. CGO lied before, and can the leopard change its spots? The wells they had are all in one small area, and they ignored seasonal effects. There's all kinds of things wrong. Okay, and they're using what we call the cigarette scheme on Mount Shasta, and that's if nobody drops dead immediately, just poison them slowly. Did Jesus of Nazareth ever propose that? Did Jesus Christ ever tell us that it was morally correct to steal from the public as long as it's only $40 a month? Holy cow!
Thank you, Francis.
Okay. Holy cow.
Thank you very much. Bela Greenspoon.
Hi, I'm Bela Greenspoon. I'm the president of the Gateway Neighborhood Association, and we just completed a win-win for water raffle. We collected from this community $17,870, so almost $18,000. That was with 48 businesses, individuals, and practitioners donating. And the reason I'm saying that is that I think it's an indication of how much community support there is for the water group that has been working so hard for 4 years to just get Crystal Geyser to do the right thing. You know, we are pro-business. We want this community to be vital and alive and have opportunities for young people and for all people, old people. But you know, I think that really indicates how much support there is for the right thing to be done. So the money that we raised is going to water so that they can continue to work with the legal counsel and experts who are doing some very in-depth analyses that I know have been shared with you, and I really want to encourage the city to look at that analysis, that range of analysis on so many things, because I think it's rich and I think it's important. So I also want to thank Berryvale, where we tabled for 2 weeks in front of Berryvale, and they're still doing a roundup for water until this Friday, so you can go in and donate if you like it. And I want to thank you for your service and also for taking a strong stand to do the right thing for our community, for our natural environment, and for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Bela. Terry Hogstrom. Tara. Sorry, Tara.
Well, hello, and thank you for your support for the community concerning this Crystal Geyser project. My name is Tara Hockstrom, and I'd like to speak for myself and my husband, who can't be here because he's working tonight. We're homeowners and taxpayers living on Ski Village Drive in the vicinity of the proposed Crystal Geyser plant. We're in the unincorporated area, but we're in your sphere of influence. We are members of the Gateway Neighborhood Association and participants in the Big Springs groundwater elevation study. We have many concerns about the Crystal Geyser operation in our neighborhood. We wrote letters to the county after the draft EIR was released about our concerns, and these concerns were not adequately addressed in the final EIR. We find the few proposed mitigations unacceptable. So many things have already been talked about tonight. Our concerns about the water pumping and no monitoring, no regulations, no caps in case of drought, and in case of well issues with the neighbors. We're concerned about the air and water pollution from plastics and the chemicals that would go into the leach field, because our soil is very porous and these chemicals will end up in our groundwater. We're concerned about the noise and trucking. That's been mentioned many times. There's not very many mitigations at all that are going to help the neighborhood. And last but not least, but because this is a concern I haven't heard about talked about tonight, they have a 30,000-gallon propane tank, which is going to have to be filled many, many times. My husband did a lot of research, and most mishaps with propane tanks happen when they're being filled. Fires or explosions happen the most when the tanks are being filled. And there is nothing in the EIR that says has any protections for the community concerning the propane tank and the filling of the propane tanks. So there's no safety measures for that at all. And that's a very big concern, because there's something about that, you know, if an explosion happened, it would be like a mile away in like no time. So in closing, when we built our home here on Ski Village Drive, we had many regulations that we had to adhere to. And I was wondering why a large corporation like Crystal Geyser is getting such a free ride and does not have as many regulations, even though they will impact the community way more than our home does. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tara. Hey, Molly Brown. Molly, are you here? There you are. And then John Kennedy.
Molly Brown, and I live in the city of Mount Shasta. I want to speak to sort of some of the more encompassing issues, because there's so many people here that have the details down. But overall, it's clear that this is not a company that we should support, because they are not doing the right thing. This EIR and this final EIR is just full of verbiage to cover up the fact that they're not addressing the issues that were raised by whatever, 150 or 200 comments that were, and a lot of those comments were very scientifically based. They weren't just people, you know, waving their arms and saying, oh, it's just awful. They were as a result of real studies and hours. How much is the city paying for city staff time? Is Crystal Geyser reimbursing us for the city staff time that's being taken up with this thing? I don't think so. So I'm very concerned about just doing business with, I think, an unethical organization that I think this is. The other thing I'm really happy about, the general plan being redone to consider climate change. And frankly, we're going to have to stop having all these trucks driving around carrying things here and there. That's a major source of greenhouse gases, which is causing climate change. So in a few years, maybe we don't get to do that anymore. And then what are we going to be left with? We're going to be left with an empty building and a lot of broken promises. So I've just, from a climate change point of view, I think this is a lousy industry to allow into our community. And I know it's outside the city limits, but it's within your sphere of influence, and I really appreciate your concern, that you're really listening and being concerned about some of these issues. So thanks.
Thank you, Molly. John?
My name is John Kennedy. I've been in Mount Shasta for 72 years, and I've traveled the world, and I've been to many different places, and there's no place like Mount Shasta. I'm very much in favor of Crystal Geyser coming in with their water plant. As in this report, it shows that Mount Shasta has done nothing but decrease in population. It says here that in 2009 we had 3,517 people in town. Last year we had decreased down to 3,292 people. And how do you think that we're ever going to start growing as a community unless we allow businesses like Crystal Geyser come into this area? They're not the people that you keep thinking that you're listening to these people talk about. These people here are coming in, bringing us jobs, 60-some jobs, over $1 million worth of payroll, which will increase, multiply up to $5 to $8 million in the community. The taxes that they're going to end up creating, not through property tax, but sales tax for the county and for the city, are just nothing but a plus. The Crystal Geyser comes in, even though they haven't even started yet. They've donated money to the 4th of July. They donate to the Boy Scouts. They donate to many different things here. It may not be just water, but it's also money that they put in. If we continue on the way we're going right now with the attitude of no growth here in Mount Shasta, we're not going to go anywhere. You know, we're losing businesses because of the attitude, and most businesses don't want to come here because of what we're going through right now. People against everything here. If we wanted to put a motel in or a big restaurant, box store, or whatever, we're not going to be allowed to because everybody's going to fight that. I understand where they're coming from. They're all retired. They come up here and it's a beautiful area. It's a great place to live. And they don't want it to change. They want it to stay the same. But that you can't survive as a community if you continue on the way you are right now. So the thing is that you guys are talking already about delaying this thing. You want to say, hey, you know, we need to study this more. You can study it for years and years and years. You're not going to get all the answers you want. You need to start moving forward with this thing and get it going and get Crystal Geyser operating. Thank you.
Thank you, John. John Delamico.
I don't move rather rapidly anymore. However, my name is John Delamico. I've lived in the community for almost 40 years now. City Council, staff, my friends who are interested in getting something done for the well-being of the community. Unfortunately, Mount Shasta has a group of naysayers who are opposed to any progress, many of whom are here this evening. Let's move on, get something done. The challenge this evening was to the contract administration, and it's important to recognize that the contract, Crystal Geyser will have to perform in accordance with. And I know that John Kenny will keep everybody on their toes. One of the things that we need to keep in focus, this community right here, I had a project that I was working on in 27. I circulated a petition for the secondary ingress egress here at If the train blocks both Nixons, you can't get in, you can't get out. There have been many people who've been confined here to this area. Crystal Geyser has established two 60-foot easements on a piece of property which will allow us to gain access to Kingston Road, to resolve a sewage problem that the district has here. And here again, it will help to improve our community. I want to thank you all for listening attentively, and thank God we'll get something done here in the near future. God bless you all.
Thank you, John. Raven. Raven.
Raven Stevens, Mount Shasta. I really recommend, we spent a lot of money on expert letters that we sent to John around traffic, water, noise. Those are super crucial that could answer the questions that this lady here has. You don't have to go back and read all the response to comments from AES because they're not worth the paper they're written on, frankly. The sewer system, you guys, the heads up that I think that you need to look at is that in the mitigation section, they say that who's going to be monitoring wastewater treatment is the county and not the city. And that's an error on the line. It should say the city will be monitoring your effluent flows. You should know that option 2 and option 3 allow use of the leach field. And in their document, they have admitted that they will be polluting our groundwater aquifer. It's admitted in the FEIR. Hydrology, it is foreseeable that Spring Hill needs for fire safety, that there needs to be a well out there. I've been hearing that since I moved here, and that is in the capital improvement plan. Water quality issues are very, very complex. But in that FEIR, they completely ignored every single neighborhood person's well that had issues. They called those people's issues anecdotal. Basically, they said it didn't matter. 10 years of pumping and people had issues. You cannot ignore that. Rather, they love their theoretical models. They want to take those to the bank rather than testing real wells. We will be fighting that, just so you know. Noise, neighbors did complain about vibrational effects, and it was from the Deck 6 well. They also complained about rooftop noise, which I think that it looks like they're working on that. So we'll give them that. Transportation and circulation, and I sent you guys this email. You should have it in your inbox, except for Tim's, it always bounces, Tim. I don't know what to tell you. To say that it's a contractual obligation that the truckers stay off of residential streets and downtown streets and don't idle doesn't mean a thing. For 10 years, people have complained that they had those issues, so that doesn't work. You have to have it stipulated, even if it's not a mitigation. I think Tom Brohard's letter for traffic, you really must focus on that because he outlines the traffic warrants for your wearing down of your streets. Those warrants that they used actually aren't right. They're not correct. So you guys should take a look at that. And just keep in mind that, real people live around that plant. We appreciate the letter that you've given us and the protections, and keep up the good work. I know this is really hard because you guys aren't experts and you rely on some people who are getting paid, and then there's a lot of us who aren't getting paid that have done a lot of reading. So please read those expert letters. Thank you.
Thank you, Raven. Bruce Hillman.
My name is Bruce Hillman. I live in Mount Shasta, and I'm the board president of We Advocate Thorough Environmental Review. And we really see that this FEIR is so flawed and so filled with inaccuracies and oversights and misstatements that it really should be recirculated and start over from a new draft. And I would hope that the city would agree with that. One thing that is really indicative of some of the problems with this report is it's quoted both in the N-Plan responses and many times with the FEIR that this plant had previously been operating for 10 years with no pumping problems. There's been numerous statements that that is not true from neighbors that were by the well, but also it's stated that the previous plant pumped 160 gallons per minute. And it says it in the FEIR during previous operations of the plant from 2000 to 2010, it operated 2 bottling lines that reportedly used a monthly average of 160 gallons per minute. However, there's nothing that substantiates that statement. If you look at the mitigated negative deck that was done under Dannon, they said, and that was done while the plant was operating, they said they used 60 gallons per minute. The chart used in Appendix X of the FEIR, which shows what they said, well, we got electrical records and used that to estimate water pumping. However, if you look at that in Appendix X, it shows that there was probably some amounts for 2 years where it might have been close to 150, but then it went way down from 2007 to when the plant closed. So the statements, even within the internal report, are not consistent, that the average usage of that plant is much less than what they're planning to pump now. So they will be pumping more, not less, than what was done there before. And then you said that under previous operations, the plant drew down 1.5 feet of nearby wells. Then under the plan, they're saying now, oh, we only measured 0.6. So there's some real discrepancies when before plans were using less, now they're using more. Also on noise, there's a difference between noise and vibration, and the noise was tested by the plant after the DEIR, and they found that the noise from the HVAC was way over what their models predicted. And so they went back and said, well, we'll have to put more shielding on the plant noisemakers or put quieter equipment. That just shows how flawed many of their models are when tested against reality. And so this modeling program that they use cannot be trusted.
Thank you, Bruce. Peggy Risch.
Okay, how is everybody? Don't see many smiles. Okay, it's a long evening. My name is Peggy Risch, and I want to focus on one point here that I hope that you make an adjustment in your letter to the county on this FEIR, and that is specifically mitigation measure 4.12-1. And I sent everyone here an email this morning. Did you all get it, I think? And you, Bruce, right? And basically, if you read that, what I'm asking is that when you made your comments on the DEIR, you were all satisfied with the original language in that mitigation measure, except for to just omit one word. But in the FEIR, what happens is there's a whole nother set of language there that does not restrict the volume adequately that goes into the city's wastewater treatment plant. It's not a minor oversight. It's not a minor, insignificant change in the language. It will radically affect the functioning of our wastewater treatment plant, and I beg you that you return and ask the county to return to the original language found in the DEIR for mitigation measure 4.12 3-1 for all the reasons I have outlined here in this comment. I'm really sorry that InPlan missed this radical change in this mitigation measure, but nonetheless, it is drastic. And the difference is the volume that would be going into the wastewater treatment plant under the original mitigation measure is limited to 24,000 gallons at all times, at any time. Right, Rod? But that's not what it says now. It actually says that you could go up to 50,000 gallons per day during a peak wet weather flow event, the most drastic weather that could happen, and they could actually, with the discretion, double. So we need to change that back to the original language. You were happy with it. I was happy with it, and that's not always easy. So thank you very much for your attention to correcting that major oversight in the FEIR.
Thank you, Peggy. Okay, thanks very much, folks, for your patience. We have gone through, I see you, we've gone through all the names on the list, and now I'd like to invite those of you who have additional comments that hopefully haven't been said before to come on up, one at a time. You'll have to self-monitor, I don't know your names. Please share your name to begin with.
Hi, my name is Patricia Osborne, and I am a registered nurse and public health nurse, and also a community member of the Siskiyou County Air Pollution Quality Control Board. I am here today because there's a major point about the health risk assessment that was not revised in the version of the draft EIR. It models the emission of 100 heavy-duty truck trips, but the new fleet is now 103 heavy trucks, as well as 74 light to medium truck trips. These emissions from the new fleet mix are unaccounted in the health risk assessment. The maximal individual cancer risk is determined by that. And they say that it remains less than significant. So there's been an actual 60% increase in admissions reported in the final EIR that have not been revised in the health risk assessment. PM particle material 2.5 is well documented carcinogenic because it can penetrate deep into the lung tissue. Diesel particulate matter is ultrafine, which the state of California clearly states is responsible for a majority of known cancer risk from outdoor pollutants, increases the risk of stroke, heart attacks, and asthma in children. This increase creates a notable increase with sensitive receptors within 1,500 feet, which includes schools, retirement communities, and our local hospital, including the local park in which we sit behind right in here. Whereas this is creating a potential toxic hotspot in our community. The health effects of PM10 and PM2.5 are well documented. There is no evidence of a safe level of exposure or a threshold below which no adverse health effects occur. So as a public health nurse and somebody that is actively trying to work with at the county level to protect this, I really hope that the city can incorporate that health risk assessment, because we're the ones that live in this community. As noted in the air quality 4.22, the environmental setting says that cold winter months have some incidents of an inversion layer forming when the air in the valley cools rapidly on clear nights, becoming trapped underneath warmer masses of air. This trapping of cold air can inhibit the movement of air, resulting in poor air quality. So we have ourselves a situation where we need to, as a community in Mount Shasta, need to look at the health risks associated with diesel emissions in the factory in regards to that inversion layer, and also the risks that we're willing to take to our community's health.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, my name is Betsy Fair, and I am from McLeod. And we had a big issue with Nestle, who came in 2003 and wanted to take our water. And I appreciate the council here for being strong. We defeated Nestle. You can do it too. One thing I wanted to bring up in Nestle's EIR was that it was inadequate. It was also what was left out of the EIR. And I see that's what's happening, what's happening here. When Nestle, they paid for their own people to do the studies, and they paid for a professor from Davis. And that professor was to address some of the issues, I can't remember what they are, but in the EIR. A big contributor to to Davis's funding was Nestle. I imagine they still give a lot of money, but they certainly did at the time. And the professor, when we did a little research on how could he come up with this information that he gave, he's retired and over 80 years old. So what I'm saying here is that anybody can be an expert, and they can channel their expertise to show what they want it to show. And I think that that's probably what's happened here. Another thing I wanted to bring up with Nestle, they have said in different parts of the community, not just McLeod, but in Michigan and all over, they said that if your well dries up, you have to prove that we're the ones that caused it. How do you do that? Just something to think about, and I like the way you guys are open and listening. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary St. Marie. Thank you for your presentation. And I thank the public for all of their presentations as well. I'd like to approach what's being said from a little bit different point of view.
Mary, could you back off of the thing a little bit?
I can.
Thank you.
Is that enough? Okay. Whenever a group comes together, there's usually a premise. And it's hoped that that is a premise that everybody agrees with. I feel that sometimes when communities come together, they come together with a false premise. And I feel like part of the false premise, not intended, but a false premise unintended, is the imbalance between the words quality and quantity. And from the very beginning of the meeting tonight was talked about slow growth in Shasta. And it was automatically assumed that everybody's talking about economic growth. There's another kind of growth, and it's called quality growth. And the people that have been speaking tonight, even though they've been giving incredible research and information that's wonderful, if you look at it carefully, it comes under the category of they care about quality growth in Mount Shasta. That's what's really been discussed tonight, is quality growth. It is imperative that we have a balance between economic growth, which is quantity, and quality growth, which is the aesthetics. And I think that there is an overlooking of the importance of that balance. And I know that it's easy, for instance, with a city council in any community to get really, really into the economic growth, the quantity growth, because they're in charge of so many things that have to do with the economics. But I feel that if one takes a deeper, I have a yellow light. I usually just keep going when I'm driving. okay, that when we look at where we're going in this community, that we really take the broad look of what's been going on here for the last 35 years, with the aesthetics being so important for our quantity growth. So our quality growth is really hand in hand with our economic or quantity growth. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mary.
Rosa McCoy, Mount Shasta. One missing element I found was in the land use, and that would be under high wildfire danger. It's late. Wildfire. There's overlay maps, and one is high wildfire. Pardon me? Yes. And
Can you repeat that, Rosalind?
wildfire
Severity zone.
Severity zone.
Yes. And I noticed that our last fire hydrant is across the street from the plant in front of the sheriff's department, and I understand that the water flow there is very low. And on the other side of the plant where the propane is, there isn't any fire hydrants, and it would be very difficult and possible to get a big truck from that fire hydrant to the other side of that plant. And so I would request that you look at, are they really building in fire suppression into this plan? And under hazardous material, it states that Crystal Geyser would be responsible to design that in and have water suppression. They have plenty of water pressure there, we don't, and so they should have their own fire hydrants on those other sides of the plant to make sure that no fire happens to those propane tanks or to our homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind.
Hello, I'm Dennis Cross. Been in business in Mount Shasta since 1961. I've lived in Mount Shasta for 70 years. Something that I believe is being overlooked here is public safety. And I'm coming at it from an economic standpoint. To provide good public safety for the community, it requires tax dollars and revenue. And I believe that is an avenue that the City Council must look at, because public safety, not only in my view, is a serious problem in Mount Shasta. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm sorry, hold on. Yes? Sure. We have a question.
Can I get a clarification from the previous speaker for a second? Can you clarify a little bit more what you mean about public safety and define it for us as you see it? You said that it's. I'm sorry, I didn't write down exactly what you said, but you said that it's.
Well, I didn't come here prepared to say anything, but I will say the homeless situation and vagrants, things like that. I've experienced it on my property, and I'm sure that the city fathers are very well of what's happening around town. And I believe that volunteers are doing a wonderful job of cleaning up the messes that are left, but cleaning up the mess is not solving the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dale.
I'm Dale LaForest. I'd like you to direct InPlan to make some minor revisions to its report, there are some problems with lighting and with noise. As far as lighting, this is a large project that might have nighttime lighting impacts, including what's called sky glow, where bright lighting from a facility can actually obscure views of nighttime skies. Now, the EIR does not include any lighting plan, and the city has asked for more lighting information, including a lighting plan. The county has refused to provide that, though. It said that it's not required to. What is being proposed instead by InPlan is that there be a private meeting where Crystal Geyser submits a lighting plan to the planning director. It be approved by the city or by the director. That would violate CEQA, though, for several reasons. EIRs evaluate environmental impacts now and don't allow them to be rubber stamped or approved behind closed doors. CEQA requires that an EIR, including its studies, be approved by the agency, the Board of Supervisors, not by the staff of the agency, and also denies the public its right to review the impact. Now, as far as lighting, it takes more than just shielding the light fixtures. If you've got a light-colored building, you have white snow, you have other conditions, very bright light can be shielded but still provide a very bright nighttime situation. The case that Tim Stearns and I once referred to, called Sundstrom v. County of Mendocino, is directly on point, and the draft EIR needs a lighting plan. There isn't one in it. As far as noise impacts, the city has also asked for more information about backup beepers as far as daytime and nighttime impacts. The final EIR revised that regarding eliminating nighttime, but did not eliminate the daytime impacts that were included in the city's request. In fact, if anything, with more truck traffic in the daytime, the number of beeping noises will increase. Now, the EIR doesn't provide an adequate noise study. That's one of the reasons the city was concerned about it. The draft was released in January, and due to the unusual weather conditions, it was impossible, literally impossible, to do an independent noise study when there was freezing weather, deep snow, and rain. So I requested an extension of time so that the public could independently review the study that was obviously wrong and inadequate. That's why Ballard redid it. The county refused to allow us that time. Now we're being presented with a new noise study in the final EIR without recirculating it, without the 45 days. So I'm asking that that be recirculated, the entire EIR. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Other comments?
I
I'm
have
sorry,
to
Dennis.
apologize. I showed my age. I said city fathers, I meant city leaders.
Thank you. Angelina.
Okay, my name is Angelina Cook. I work with the Mount Shasta Bioregional Ecology Center, and I live in McLeod, and I've been working on water protection issues in the Mount Shasta area for more than 10 years. I have a question for clarification. Perhaps NPlan can address it. Is the statement of overriding consideration necessary because of the EIR's finding of significant impact on climate change? Or is it from a different, is that the need for the significant impact? Okay. Then I'm confused on CEQA's juxtaposition on not requiring the full economic or fiscal impact analysis, but requiring a statement of overriding consideration when the information relies on the full economic disclosure from Crystal Geyser. I understand this isn't an opportunity for discourse, but I think it's an important point to bring up. I am extremely motivated by City Council's response to the EIR. I'm very encouraged by your need to require adequate treatment of your very real concerns, specifically the economic costs to the city as well as the need for future water supplies in the city. I think it's important to bring up the climate change issue, partially because I think CEQA fails to adequately express climate impacts in the EIR, but also because the city of Mount Shasta has just stepped up to the plate to develop a resilience strategy and revise the general plan through the lens of climate change, which is a major step forward for this region, both environmentally as well as economically. If Mount Shasta really does want to generate revenue and taxes and good jobs, we will not be doing that on a platform of continued business as usual or extractive resource development. We will be doing that on a platform of responsible water and forest management and watershed stewardship and demonstrating leadership in climate preparedness in this area. So I know your job is very difficult, and I think I'm grateful to hear the deliberation going on. I think this is a great learning opportunity for everyone involved, and good luck.
Thank you. Others, yes, Vicki.
Thank you again for having the meeting this evening. I know I sent my letter in, and I'm sure you've had a chance to look at it, so I won't repeat any of those comments. What occurred to me as I was listening to the excellent presentations by the various members of the Audience Water Gateway Neighborhood Association and Mary St. Marie's comments about quality and quantity is that one of the best books I've ever read is Rianne Eisler's The Real Wealth of Nations, taking the title from Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. Her thesis is that the true wealth is in your resources, in your humanity, in your artists, in your poets, in the beautiful things that contribute to a quality of life. It's an amazing book. It talks about jobs, it talks about quality, lifestyle. I'm recalling what we discovered when we looked at the request by Crystal Geyser for a tax write-off with the state. And in that application, those 150 jobs mentioned, or 200 jobs mentioned in the grant application with the EDA, suddenly became 13 jobs. I think you recall that we were quite concerned about that. The 13 jobs were perhaps some local jobs, but they later admitted they were going to close their plants in Calistoga, in Bakersfield, and in the Bay Area, and they were going to move those jobs here, which is a violation of the EDA grant policy. So those jobs for our community are really a figment of our imaginations, or theirs. We know better. We know the quality of those jobs. We've seen what's happened in Weed. I think some of you are aware that in Weed for 20 years, Crystal Geyser Roxanne, yes, a sister company, but still half Otsuka, 49% Otsuka Pharmaceuticals, have been paying $37.50 for their sewer. The public, the Weed citizens, a city of great poverty and sacrifice after the Bowles fire, those people have been subsidizing Crystal Geyser for 20 years. This is something that, at least, with the new studies, there's going to be some equity, and I know you're making every effort, but something has to be clear. In Orland, when they looked at the traffic, they didn't even have an EIR, and they said, you will pay $10.68 per truckload to pay for our streets. It has to be clear. I so appreciate that you're giving us a chance to be here. I hope that you look at those studies. I know Carla's got a huge job ahead of her, but the studies done by the experts, which were paid for by the Water Group and Gateway Neighborhood Association, are remarkable. These are not fly-by-night people. These are experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
Hello, my name is Christina Wells, and I just want to say thank you as well to everyone for being here. I can see that this has been a heavy load for many people in the community and the city workers and county workers. I've been sitting over here just witnessing it. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, have you ever experienced when something is meant to happen, it happens with ease and with grace, and it doesn't take you down, it doesn't feel hard and heavy and like you're stuck in the mud? All of this feels muddy. It just feels really muddy, and I see everyone around stressed and burdened with so many issues because there's so many questions about what's right and what's wrong. There's safety risks, there's chemical risks, there's environmental risks, there's this. But then on the other hand, we want economic growth. We want more money in the community, and we want quality growth, and we want that to be balanced. When something is supposed to happen, it's easy. And what I want to encourage is inviting in the possibility and creating space for something new to come into Mount Shasta, because it does need growth and it does need change, but we have to open our minds to something different that's in alignment with all the environmental changes that are taking place. Let's throw that old paradigm stuff that isn't working anymore. There's so many things in a system that's just not working. So why do we keep going back to it? Let's do something different. Let's allow space for a business to come in that has a vision for positive alignment with the quality and with the economic, and that's thinking about the environment. It's taking care of Gaia, because we can't keep taking more from her than what we're giving. We see it all around the world, the effects that it has, and we face it every day. And just pumping thousands of gallons of water, that's just taking. It's not just ours. It belongs to the earth. It belongs to the birds and the animals that we love to watch. They need to drink too. It belongs to the plants that are growing that we love to see, that provide us oxygen. We are in the most unique relationship with life that we forget to talk about. We are breathing with these plants. We are 76% water in our body? Would you want somebody drilling into your body? We're up. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to encourage maybe one or two other comments, and then I'd like to call up for a recess so that we can collect our thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. I want to first, I'm Pam Nerona. I'm a resident of Mount Shasta. I want to thank the City Council, first off, and Bruce's contributions, Juliana, Rod, all of the staff, in working so hard to start to create a backbone. I think I've seen this tonight. I see a backbone growing, and in a fair way to look at what Crystal Geyser is attempting to do in our community, and kind of setting some boundaries, strong boundaries around that. And to echo what the speaker just spoke about a minute ago, which brought me up here really, is the fact that we need to be more visionary about the types of businesses we bring to the community. I understand that Crystal Geyser walked in a few years ago. The door was opened, they walked in. There's a lot of forces that created that. But I am one of those individuals and companies that has come to this community 2 years ago, relocated from San Francisco, that has a new visionary way of bringing economic development to communities. I'm a capitalist. I'm CEO. I'm supposed to make tons of money in my startup. I'm a clean technology startup, and it has to do with water. And we're a benefit corporation. And for those of you who don't understand what a benefit corp or a B Corp is, it's a new legal entity that actually brings back economic development and benefit in a social and environmental level to communities. These are the types of companies we want to bring here, and I am committed to being here as a businesswoman and bringing wealth to this community, and I'm hoping to attract more like it. So I think at this point, this is a chance for the city council and for the community and for the staff of the city to say, okay, we brought in a company that is causing a lot of issues. It's not going smoothly. It's causing a lot of trouble. They don't mean to. It's just the fact that the community doesn't want us. We're a poor community just like weed. We got sucked into bringing in a company that's promising lots of benefits for the community. Well, let me tell you, a benefit corporation's going to bring a lot more. They don't just contribute to organizations like Mountain Runners or Boys and Girls Club. They have to prove to their shareholders and on the bottom line, and they're held accountable on global reporting initiatives, that they bring wealth to their community, both socially and environmentally. So what I'd like to see the great city council do, and the staff, all the work you're doing, is recirculate that draft, bring it back, and just think. Get our broadband in, get our wastewater treatment plant in, and get our water service in. Build that infrastructure so that people will want to come here and start great new visionary 22nd century businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hopefully our last comment. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Bob Henson, and my wife and I live out at North Old Stage, about a mile north of the hatchery. And one of the issues I want to talk about, the main issue I want to talk about, is groundwater. You know, and my concern is that it's possible over the last, the 10 years that Dannon and Koch operated, there might be some phthalates already in our groundwater. And this is the issue that I raised in the draft EIR, is for them to take a look to see what the baseline is around the plant and around the homes, private and public, that are downstream from the plant. What Crystal Geyser is doing is they're piggybacking on an agreement that was made, well, let's see, it was under order, WD Order 5-1-233 with the Water Board to discharge in that leach field. But is it a viable source? One of my concerns is one of our most valuable assets here in Mount Shasta is our groundwater. And if we pollute it, we can't go back and get it back again. So what do we do about that? The risk is that we're bringing in a plant that's taking absolutely pure water out of the ground. They're polluting it, which we don't know what it is that they're generating, what the pollution is that they're generating. But it could be phthalates and it could be other things too. The danger is they're taking this pure water, polluting it, and pumping it right back down into the groundwater. And there are a lot of people just like me, my wife, that would be affected by this. And if the groundwater gets polluted, it's going to be hell for the whole community. You know? And this has happened in other places. So I think as a recommendation, what I would do is I would go and look at what it is that they're putting into the water, into the groundwater. You know, they're using criteria that's coming out of the Water Board, but do we know what that criteria is? Are they measuring from some of the pollutants that might come from these plastics that the plant is going to be using? So we're not really clear on what that is, but I think we need, you know, one of the things I think we could do is raise that issue, is what it is that they're really measuring.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all very much for your comments. I'd like to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll reconvene. And if I could have John Kenny and Carla and Bruce come up, please. Okay, I'd like to reconvene, please. Thank you for taking your seats. Okay, I understand that we have just gotten some information received from our engineering contractor. I wonder, Bruce or Rod, would you like to summarize that for us to be entered into the record?
With respect to the comments regarding mitigation measure 4.12-1, it appears, if the city engineer and I are looking at the correct version of the final EIR, the mitigation measure as amended is not acceptable to the city. It is correct that the language pertaining to the quote, or 0.05 MGD during peak wet weather flow conditions, end quote, since the last version, is something that we didn't discuss, and we're not in support of that. We specifically called out for the maximum allowable flows from CG to be the 0.024 at all times. So we were very clear on that, and I suggest that we remain clear on that, to stick to the 0.24 MGD maximum per day. Furthermore, we didn't like how the determination for daily flow was taken. It's not really how it's done in the industry. The maximum allowable daily flow is just for the day in question. You can't average it for the week to determine an average daily, because the impact to the wastewater treatment plant occurs on the day in which it receives the flow. So an example, you can't have 48,000 gallons one day and 0 the next, and say the impact was only 24,000 gallons for those 2 days. The permit will be written for maximum daily flows. So if and when we do issue a industrial discharge permit for this, it will say 0.024 maximum daily flows. And that's how it will be calculated. The city will have daily flow records to verify compliance. And if the maximum permitted daily flow is exceeded, and the city is able to accommodate the additional flow, Crystal Geyser would need to increase their connection fee, is what it would come down to. So we can draft something more formal to include in the response letter once again. But that's our recommendation on that specific issue.
Thank you. Thank you. So during the break, we were up here trying to figure out what process we should use to go forward here. And what we decided is that we will outline the points that we agree need to be specified in our letter. Bruce started one, and we'll have additional ones more than likely that we agree to. We're not going to draft a final letter tonight. That would be just a horrible scene. So we are going to specify the points that we want to be included in the letter. And before we then switch to that, I've asked John to speak to the legality of the process, where we're at in the legal process, so that you all understand what we as a city council have a scope for to decide and what we don't. John, can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, we're close to the end of the process, I think, as far as our input. We're both a responsible agency and an interested party, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the process, the EIR process, is we've discussed before, and you made a point of, again today, to pointing out to the people in the audience here that it's nice that they came and expressed their thoughts here today, but where their thoughts have merit or legal meaning is when they're discussed to either Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors, or both, depending on what the process is, because they are the ones that are making the decision. Your comments, the city's comments, the city comments are really broken into two areas. One is a responsible agency, and that's what Rod was just talking about. We want to make real clear that the comments on what we are going to accept, and if the EIR doesn't change, that's not going to change what we permit. So we want to make real clear that the EIR is clear on what the maximum flows are, all the flow data that Rod spoke about, because when a discharge permit comes to us, an application, we're going to rely on the EIR if it's approved, but we're not going to impose a condition on the discharge permit that won't work for us. So that has to be real clear. The rest of the matters discussed here tonight, really, other than that they were well thought out, and that the city obviously went through a lot of work to put its comments together and to respond to the comments, the work that Carla did. But in the end, the comments from the city council on those issues really don't have any more legal merit than a comment from a citizen. The trick is they may be more persuasive in reality, and the reviewing authority may consider them more because of the work that went into it. But all the comments that the citizens made here today need to be made. Again, that they can't assume that those comments have to be included in the city's letter, because they do not. And the only requirement is that should a EIR be approved and challenged, you can't challenge new issues. So it's important that if somebody has a comment that they think need to be made, and that the EIR has to include or doesn't include sufficiently, they need to make sure that they or someone else raise that comment, because if they want to challenge it later, if it hasn't been raised, basically it's waived. But it doesn't seem likely that many issues are going to be waived here, from what I can see. So that's kind of what it is. Now, the city council heard Carla's presentation, and they gave some suggestions to her, and Rod's had some suggestions. The city council could give direction to her to amend her comment letter and authorize the mayor or mayor pro tem to sign that letter and get it to the planning commission in sufficient time.
Thank you. Now, question for clarification, John. And John is our city attorney, for those of you who don't know. Would NPLAN need to revise their letter, or would it hold more weight if they did so, or could we simply include the additional points in our cover letter with NPLAN's letter attached?
Any way that's easier. Probably easier just to include additional matters. The sole goal is to get them before the planning commission or whoever's going to make the decision in time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, my suggestion, and I'm open to feedback here, is to begin with you, Carla, and have you list what you believe you heard as comments made by city council members about things that need to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And we'll take them one by one, and I'll have any of you just speak an objection if you don't like it. And we're not going to request that it be worded perfectly. It's just a bulleted item referring to a given subject. Will that work?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is council needs to give direction. we're not going to dictate, but we're giving direction as to the essence or the point,
Right,
the
Right.
concept.
right. And I assume we need three of us. If there's contention about an issue, we need three of us, and we can do a formal vote. But short of that, I'm just going to look to all of you and see if there's any disagreement with the point that's raised. Is that fair? Okay. Carla, can you begin? Thank you.
And what I'll do for Bruce is summarize the changes and supplemental information and provide that to him for his letter. The first item that I pointed out is the final EIR and response to comments states that the initial wastewater treatment option will be selected prior to project approval, but that doesn't seem to be identified in any of the Planning Commission comments. And the other item that I will research some more is, can the city say no to the wastewater treatment options that allow the use of leach fields?
So you're going to research that.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to state this in the letter? That we want.
I think what I would say is that option one, which is discharge into the city system, is the only acceptable option, and that we require a written agreement with the county for the removal of the leach fields prior to operation of the business.
And we're saying this as a responsible agency.
Yes.
For this particular point. Okay. Yes, John? Okay, go ahead.
The limits, max
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay,
You have the limits built into that?
the 24,000 versus 50,000 you're talking about?
We did forward the email with the exact language from Paul Reuter to Carla already, so she should have it.
So that would also fall under our purview as a responsible
Correct.
agency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then we discussed the signage and lighting plans, and I will clarify the amendment that the county appeals process would be the Planning Commission and also Board of Supervisors rather than City Council.
Mm-hmm. Just a language change.
Saying that you're waiving any opinion, the city's waiving any opinion on the lighting? I don't.
No, there's
No,
a
what-
statement in there that where she quoted it, that the appeal could come to the city council, and it should have said to the board of supervisors. She's just going to
It's
change that.
simply correcting a typo on page 4. An important typo.
Are there any other concerns that you would like addressed regarding signage and lighting?
Yes,
I think-
I need a moment.
I think that would fall under the general umbrella of the relationship between the city and the county.
Yes.
We brought up several points where it would help us to have a relationship. So,
And then impacts from pumping on adjacent wells. I will change that language from there's no substantial evidence to substantial evidence has been presented. There were also some speakers this evening who referenced some reports that have been prepared by experts, and I haven't seen those reports yet, but I will review those and work with Bruce to incorporate any pertinent information.
Which will include the information that the Public Works Director gave in terms of...
Correct, yes. And I also want to thank the speaker and Rod for pointing out the change to mitigation measure 4.12-1, because the response to comments only states that they deleted the words "or eliminate" from that mitigation measure. They don't say anything about any other revisions to that measure that were made. And so I think I'll go back to the individual sections of the final EIR to make sure that there isn't any other information that they included but didn't specifically reference in the responses. And then we will do some research on the traffic index and structural integrity of the roadways and ask for clarification to be included in the final EIR regarding what does traffic index 11 really mean and why did they come to the conclusion that that's not significant.
Is there a weight limit, and ask if there's a weight limit on the 11 versus the 13, 14?
Mm-hmm.
Because those could be up to 80,000 pounds, and maybe they're figuring 50,000 or something. So that could really influence, how are they determining it's an 11? How many pounds per load?
And I would like to see the council take a position that there will not be trucks on Spring Hill Drive. How do the other council members feel about that?
There really isn't a reason for that. They can bypass it from the on-ramp, off-ramps there. They wouldn't really need to ever get on Spring Hill Drive.
Which is the reason that we should take
Well, the
position.
other, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm glad you're bringing it up, but I know that, for instance, Sousa Ready Mix may be traveling that road with equally heavy equipment, and we need to think in terms of consistent regulation here.
When I see them, they're usually on the freeway. I don't see them I never see them going down Spring Hill Road.
Well, it was suggested by Carla that it's under the city's purview to create, I think, if I understood correctly, to establish our own code that would prohibit truck traffic on any road, and we could, if we wanted to, use that. That would then not target Crystal Geyser, but would be consistent for every truck hauler.
Well, short of doing that, we are responding to the FEIR.
Right.
And the FEIR, the county comments is, well, there's no reason for them to use Spring Hill Drive, so they probably won't. I think we should take a stronger stance than, oh, well, if you think they probably won't, that's fine with us.
I believe that in the earlier discussion, council recommended that there be a binding agreement, as there is include the other parts of the final EIR, that the drivers will be bound contractually not to use Spring Hill. I think that's the language you were looking for.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I believe that was true, because there's no reason they have to. They can use the freeway.
If the goal is to keep the trucks off the road, maybe we should just say, let's keep the trucks off the road rather than offering a contract as a means of doing it. If it was a condition, of the use permit that no trucks be on that road, then it'd be enforceable against Crystal Geyser. If you say, well, we want a binding contract, well, okay, here's the binding contract. Don't know what to do to make the truck drivers follow it. So, I think just keep the trucks off the road would suffice.
Is that agreeable to council members?
Anybody opposed?
Yeah, that's a given.
Well, currently,
Carla,
we
you got
don't
that?
have a lot of residents on Ski Village Drive. I mean, on
Spring Hill, no.
Spring Hill Drive right now.
But
It's
still,
about impact to the road structure.
but still, it's wear and tear on Spring Hill.
Yeah, and coming off the freeway, it's a little dangerous for pedestrians and bikes when the trucks come that fast down that curve. So,
Yeah. My opinion is stopping at the stop sign coming out is very dangerous for a truck. So it would be better having them come down the freeway off ramp and going on the on-ramp, I think, than using Spring Hill. It's a really bad corner, and if you've ever driven a truck, it's not comfortable to do that.
And that was the position that our consultants, the city's consultants, took when they were reviewing this matter earlier. So can we give that direction to
Yeah,
Carla?
any opposed?
And to staff?
Okay, that's good. We're good with that.
All right.
I would also like to do some more research on the warrants for turn lanes and acceleration lanes, so I will research that a little bit more and work with Bruce on that. And that's one of the reports that I do want to review. Is there anything else related to traffic?
So there was some reference in your report, Carla, that the city public works director needs to confirm that the traffic index is appropriate. And you said you weren't prepared to do that tonight.
Yeah, and that's one of the items I mentioned, that we need to research that.
Okay,
some
okay,
more.
fine,
So
thank you.
We'll work together and put
Okay.
something together for that.
I don't know if this falls under this category, but we talked about the city-county tax sharing agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're referring to as far as the transportation?
Yeah, that would be for road maintenance, but I think Bruce already has some language put together to work with the county.
Okay.
And then we talked about substantial evidence in support of the statement of overriding considerations. And I will put together some more specific language detailing what information we would like to see in that fiscal impact analysis that not only generally states the expenditures, but also includes specific expenditures to the city and the county for road maintenance and other public services.
So we'll continue to request, the city will continue to request the information that we requested previously.
Yes.
Before we get to overriding.
Excuse me, on that subject, I think it'd be a good idea we've asked for economic impact study, but the point is, and they say, well, you don't need one for an EIR, and they're right. But what they're left with was a statement of overriding considerations that's unsupported by anything that we know of. So I think we need to make that point that there appears to be no evidence to support the proposed statement of overriding considerations.
So you're suggesting that we link those two? The comment about the need for information regarding the fiscal impacts and the statement of overriding concern?
It's the same subject, but I think we just want to make sure
Sure.
that we make clear that there is no evidence to support that.
Okay, great.
And Carla, before you get there, on page 1011, vibration standards and noise, and I had given some suggestion earlier to creating objective standards in terms of vibration and dampening. Didn't hear from the rest of the council members if they're supportive of that as well.
So we don't know what we conclude about that unless there are the standards included in the report. You're asking that those standards be part of the
mitigation measures.
Uh-huh. Fine with me. Any objection? Okay.
And I believe what you were referring to, or your statement was, that we need to have response here that the vibration levels must be kept below a specific level, and that we need to first establish standards. They need to establish standards for vibration in traffic, and then set that maximum level that it always has to be under. That was
right, and that goes along with what we heard tonight as well, the difference between modeling and actual operation. And what we care about is reality.
Is noise in that too? Standard?
Yes, well, I've
That's probably
suggested that we address both noise and
Vibration.
vibration. And you have, Carla, you have suggested city support for adding the language that's on page 22. I would be in support of that. How do other council members feel?
Oh, is that the proposed condition of approval?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'm in favor of that.
All right, I'm seeing affirmative shakes of the head. All right.
Oh, yes. I don't know if you were planning on addressing that 1998 mitigation agreement. We talked about how there's conflict between that agreement and the subsequent agreement, and how those conflicts would be resolved.
Yeah, we can add that in the language too, and express that we still have concerns that there is no means to address those conflicts.
So the point is being made that they mention the county as being responsible for monitoring effluent volume flow, and it should be the city.
We'll check that too.
Did we already address the utilities? Did we already address utilities? The sewer, the two 18-inch has already been addressed, right?
Yes.
I think we're good with that, yeah. I don't have any other notes here. I do have a question, and perhaps this is for you, John and Carla. There have been several requests to have the FEIR recirculated due to inadequacy. Can you tell me about that? What's the history?
Well, the request is recirculated because it was insufficient. And the recirculation really applies when you get new evidence and then new information, and you recirculate it to everybody, give a comment on it. That it came up, I think Dale LaForce mentioned it with respect to, no, I forget what it was. Noise, was it noise? Maybe something like that. You know, everybody has their own opinion, but the noise study came about as a result of a comment. Sequence, you get a drive sequence, you get a comment, then somebody does a study to respond to the comment. If every time you did a comment you had to recirculate, pretty long process.
Right, and there's a lot of that in here. So Okay,
Well, that's what the process is all about.
right.
Here's the draft, you do the comments, then we respond to the comments, and as Carla pointed out, in many cases, they change things. Something, I guess, and I'm sure there was other comments that they changed things. So, and that becomes the final EIR, and that's the one you live or die on.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from folks or comments you want to make? Make sure that we have directed staff to include all the important points.
I'd like to add from my notes, there's an additional comment that I think needs to be incorporated. And the comment was city county should talk about Crystal Geyser paying part of future cumulative traffic impacts. So I think we would need to do, Carla, if you could help me draft some language on that as a condition to the final EIR or to the use permit that we'd have to
Could you
come
say
in.
it again, Bruce? I missed it, the beginning of your sentence.
Well, it's that the city and the county should talk about Crystal Geyser paying part of the cumulative traffic impacts as the city grows. While Crystal Geyser in and of itself at this point in time may not be causing huge traffic impacts, in conjunction with future growth, they should be bound to pay for their fair share. So we need language responding to the county in this letter about that.
And that goes along with the turn lane.
Yes, correct.
So I'm wondering, thank you, Bruce, that's a good reminder. I'm wondering if the 4 points you outlined in your letter, Bruce, if it would be more hard-hitting if we looked at how to specify some of these elements under number 3, agree to meet with representatives of the city with the intent of negotiating, and the tax sharing agreement 1. If we could bullet very specific items under the things that we intend, that we would like to see a meeting around. You know what I'm saying? Point number 3. So instead of leaving it general, identified environmental impacts, proposed mitigation measures, and associated public concerns, we could list some very specific things that we feel need to be addressed.
Sure, we just make the subheadings,
Yeah.
subsets of that statement.
Is there anything in the letter that Bruce did draft that anyone's uncomfortable with, assuming we're going to add to this, the things we've just addressed? Are we good with the letter otherwise?
Well, Bruce mentioned cumulative impacts. I have a note here about the groundwater cumulative impacts as well. Is that already addressed, I think, in yours? It was comment number 3.
I think Carla has that.
Groundwater.
Talked about the water master plan, well, number 3.
Carla, I think we're talking about page 5.
Well, I took notes on her comments, and it was comment number 3, groundwater.
Page 5, page 6 of your report.
Yes, we did talk about cumulative impacts to groundwater, and they did revise the final environmental impact report to add the city's future municipal wells as in the cumulative project list.
Okay. That was all that you mentioned, okay.
I guess, Bruce, I have a little problem with number 4. This process is about the FEIR regarding Crystal Geyser and the county. You're attempting to do initiate a tax sharing agreement between the county and the city. Is that something that should be handled separately, or are you using that as leverage to? What are you doing here? Is what I want to know. Yeah.
Excuse me, I think, although tax sharing was used, I think cost sharing was meant. Okay. Because tax sharing has a connotation of annexation and what you have to do to go LAFCO, and I think what
or setting up a finance
The reason
district.
I put this statement in here is that the question was, what are the impacts in this development? How are we going to pay for it? And we're getting no revenue from this project. So if we don't lock the county up some way, then we get no revenue, which means the taxpayers of the city of Mount Shasta will be subsidizing Crystal Geyser. We have tax sharing agreements between the city and the county to address the impacts of development on the two entities. I think bottom line is the city needs to get tax revenue from this if this project's going to go forward, and we'll decide where to spend it. Rather than going to the county, we have to ask them to maybe give us money back.
I'm just sensitive about tax sharing because tax sharing agreements deal with annexations.
Yes, if you, as our city attorney, I would certainly follow your advice. That was the intent of what I said. If you have better language, please offer it.
Yeah, I think cost sharing between the city and county, you know, it's obviously the money would come from taxes, but it's cost sharing.
A good modification.
The only other comment I would make is be a little bit more specific. End plan's comments to follow. I think we want to make it clear that the comments that you list here are in addition to the comments embedded in end plans.
Okay. I put that statement in for notification to the city council that in a real letter, end plans comments would follow. We won't say that in the letter. Their comments, as well as the council's comments, will be in the letter.
Good. Okay, anything else on the letter? I just have a question about plans to attend either the Planning Commission meeting or the Board of Supervisors meeting. We haven't talked about it, but I am not able to go on Wednesday nor or anything until the end of the month. So I'm assuming, Bruce, you would represent us. Is there a council member who would want to attend as well?
What time was the planning commission?
On the 20th, Wednesday, 9 a.m.
I've got folks coming into my office at 10. I can see if I can get that changed.
But I will be in attendance at the Planning Commission.
You will be there?
Yes.
Yeah, I might be able to go.
Okay.
Talk about it tomorrow.
Okay, great. And you'll let us know.
I'll go too.
Oh, well, let's see, can 3 of us go? No.
Well, no, but if John and Paul can go, that would be great.
Okay.
John,
Okay,
Paul,
that'd be
and
great.
Bruce.
Okay. And you'll let us know as soon as you can tomorrow, Bruce, about whether or not you've gotten clarity around whether it's going to be held before the Planning Commission.
I will let you know as soon as I know.
Yeah, sure.
Just a reminder, three city council members make a quorum.
Yeah.
So-
No,
And that's why we would only have
We'll
two
only
going
do two,
in
yeah.
attendance.
We didn't talk about plastics. We didn't talk about the phthalates measurements, plastics.
I think that has been addressed previously, although there was a speaker who talked about phthalates. My understanding is that the plastic bottles that Crystal Geyser uses does not include phthalates.
But what about a baseline measurement are there currently?
Well, and we have also said that using the leach field is not an acceptable alternative for the city. So we are saying we don't agree to use of the leach field for rinse water or process water. that all of the wastewater will go to the city.
Correct.
So that's, my understanding is that's the position that this council is taking.
We measure for phthalates in the wastewater, so if it does all go to the wastewater treatment plant, we would have a measurement of that.
Can we adjourn, folks? Anything else? Okay, I'd like to adjourn this fine meeting. Thank you.